Hello, my name is Franklin Wepner, and this is the beginning of a kind of open-ended discussion about the work of SHLOMO CARLEBACH. I'm basing myself just about totally here on a new book that came out about a year ago. Here it is. It's called Torah Commentary of Rabbi SHLOMO CARLEBACH, has the name in Hebrew, Even Shlomo, the stone of Shlomo. And this is part 1, Genesis. I guess that's as far as I've gotten so far. I bought this about a month ago, and up to that point, even though I knew SHLOMO CARLEBACH a little bit personally, and back about, I don't know how many years ago in New York. And I love to play his music on different instruments. I'm a klezmer man. And I've read a bunch of his stories and all that. But up till this point, my impression of SHLOMO CARLEBACH was not that deep. He did an enormous job of lighting the fire of so many people. I go around Israel and the United States, wherever I happen to be, and people are singing his songs and telling his stories and dancing. The whole business. It's working. It's a wonderful kiruv, bringing people back to Judaism movement. But up till now, for many years, I had no idea that this man also was a deep thinker. I never really spent much time at his Shabbat gatherings. All I know is a little bit of the songs and the stories a little bit. Okay, but now that I've read this book, I have definitely changed my mind about SHLOMO CARLEBACH, and I hope I can convey some of that excitement to you in these videos. And maybe I'll just say a word about how I'm going to operate here. I read the book a couple times. There is no index, so I made an index of main topics and made little subtitles for each of the sections and organized things into certain major topics. But there's so much here that I'm not going to pretend that this is going to be a systematic discussion. I'll start at the beginning. That's a very nice place to start. I think there was a song about that once. Start at the very beginning. Very nice place to start. Okay, so yeah, and I'm going to start, I thought to myself, well, should I start with a big theoretical analysis? Because whether you like it or not, and as soon as a lot of people, I'm sure, are going to start pushing delete buttons as soon as you see what I'm doing here. But at least at the beginning, I said, rather than start off with a big theoretical discussion of a structure and then put everything into that structure, I think the best way to start, just to give you an idea where I'm going with this, is to pick one little section. Actually, I'll pick three little sections here, which are all dealing with the same topic. And I'll just start dealing with them, and you'll see how I deal with them. And if you don't like that, you can go out and buy the book, and I really recommend the book, even if you don't like what I do with it. And then we can compare notes. You can send me an email, all right? In the meantime, I'm going to just lay my trip on whoever's out there, if anyone's out there. Okay, here we go. So the sections I picked here to start off with. I'm glad checking the clock there. I got to make sure I don't run over my hour. This is an hour tape, so I got to be sure I don't mess that up. Okay. There are 3 different stories here that deal with the idea of motion. The focus that Shlomo is using here. When I say Shlomo, I'm not trying to disparage him. We have to all time remember this is Rabbi SHLOMO CARLEBACH, okay? But a lot of people call him Shlomo, and I'll take the liberty of doing that anyway. Okay, so these stories are dealing with motion. And you'll see in a little while why I like these stories, because they're very basic. They get to the very heart of a lot of what I want to say anyway about his work. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I have 3, 1, 2, 5, 4 of them. 4 sections dealing with motion. So here's the first story. It's called How Do You Know? Well, it's the first Torah commentary, and it's based on the text, which I will show you. Now I have to be very careful when I use this book. I can't just quote too much from it, because that would be copyright infringement. The whole point is you should buy the book yourself. But in order to say anything about what he's saying here, I have to quote a certain amount of it. So I hope the publishers and the authors will understand that that's what I'm not intending to plagiarize anything here. Okay, so the first little thing about motion is when he says, it's called Do You Know? And it's referring to, which I will show you, which is Bereshit 12, section 1. And the point here is that God is, Hashem, God, I should say right away, I'm not that from, so I'm going to say God, I'm going to make a lot of blunders from the from point of view, and I'll let them tar and feather me for that. I guess I'll put up with that. But I'm not going to pretend to have any false piety that I don't have, you know, oh Hashem and all this. No, I'm some guy in the middle, halfway religious, halfway not religious, and I like it that way. I like to think of myself as my right foot is rightist, Hasidic, and my left foot is still that old, that guy I used to know when I was in the experimental theater world back in New York in the 70s, 80s. No, the 80s I was already in Israel. The 60s and 70s. So I have two sides, and I like having the two sides. Anyway, so God tells Abraham, I will show you where the land is. Okay, so Abraham packs up his stuff, gets his tribe together, and they set off on the way with their tents. And according to the story here, well, one day they wake up in the morning, and Abraham's all set to go, because remember God told him, lech lecha. In other words, go. Well, you could translate it literally in Hebrew, go to you, but usually it's an idiom, if I'm not incorrect, it means just keep going. Go, man, go. Let go, lech lecha. So Abraham wants to do what God says, and so he starts trying to pack up his tent, and guess what? Can't pack it up, doesn't fold up. Okay, so he tells the guys, look, God told us to keep going, so let's see what happens. You guys take your tents, pack them up, and guess what? Can't pack them up either. So the moral of the story is here. This must be the place. If you can't, we got to keep going. Number one. Number two, we got to stay here. Now, how is that? That sounds pretty nutty. What's going on here? So, as a matter of fact, Shlomo doesn't really tell us what's going on here. Doesn't say much about it. Well, he says, see, this is where we differ. Here's where I'm going to part ways with SHLOMO CARLEBACH, because he's going to give us some kind of a story, some friendly advice, some kind of holy stuff. And I, on the other hand, am going to look for the deeper, what I would say, the deeper logic that's going on here. And I'll say it right off the bat. I am not ashamed of the fact that I am up to my ears in all kinds of philosophy, especially what we call dialectical thinking. And we see it right here. And this is a beautiful example. So, if you've seen any of my videos, I keep using this example from Maimonides' Guide, Part 2 of Maimonides' Guide, where he quotes 26 principles right out of Aristotle, and he tells you, I'm going to quote 26 principles right out of Aristotle, and he's not embarrassed about doing that, and if Maimonides is not embarrassed about Aristotle, so I'm not going to be embarrassed about Aristotle either, and I'm going to focus on principle number 13 and 14, and the main point there is that there are two kinds of motion. There's busy work motion, where some people are running around trying to make a fortune or whatever, selling used cars or whatever they're doing. They're going from point A to point B to point C to point D up to X, Y, Z, and the whole life is running around. Okay, so that's not with the kind of motion that lech lecha is referring to, and Shlomo isn't giving us any of a clue to the deeper logic that's involved here. all he says is, I want you to be so holy to me. He's talking about some other Rebbe here. When you're so in holiness, you can't leave. Well, that's more mumbo jumbo. He's interpreting mumbo jumbo with mumbo jumbo, and that's where I part ways with Shlomo Carlebach. I'm going to keep coming back to him as a source, but I'm going to keep going to me as the. Okay. Now, so what's the point here? Principle number 14 of Maimonides' guide, for part 2, that Maimonides takes from Aristotle, is that there are two kinds of motion. There's linear motion, which I just said, and there's this other kind of motion, which is exactly what lech is all about. Now, what are the two characteristics of this other kind of motion, which Aristotle calls local motion, according to Maimonides? And the translators, I don't know what the Arabic original was, but anyway, local motion has two qualities. Number one, it's in one place. And here we have Abraham Avinu, our father Abraham, stuck in one place, and everyone else is stuck in one place. So far it fits. And another quality about local motion is that it's in a circle. Now, wait a second. Is God telling that? Is God telling all these guys to start running around in a circle, like the Mad Hatter or something, from Alice in Wonderland, where they're I forgot exactly what they call that thing. All the animals running around in a circle, singing a song, and maybe that's a reference to this. I don't know. But anyway, no, there's a different kind of circle involved here, and anyone that knows anything about philosophy knows what that circle is. Well, guess what? Yeah, you got it, that's it. Dialectical thinking, the circle is thesis, antithesis, synthesis, which puts you back at the thesis again. So I go from the thesis to the antithesis to the synthesis, and then that synthesis becomes a new thesis, and okay, so that's a lot of jargon, but what I mean by that, the thesis, the way I understand it right now, for this purpose, could be anything, any item, any experience, anything, any object, whatever it is. It's oneness, it's one thing. And somehow, as this thing goes through its existence, its life, it gets broken down into all kinds of opposites. For example, let's take the color whiteness, all right? Next thing you know, we put it through a prism, we get a whole rainbow of different colors. They're still related to the whiteness, but they're opposite to the white. Any one of these things is opposite to the white. Say blue is opposite to white, and also blue is opposite to red. So it's a million opposites go opening up here. That's the antithesis, the opposite of the original thing. All right? So we went from the one to the many. And of course, we got to get back to God, that God is the one, and the main idea of the dialectical thinking here is God is the one and the many and the one. Identity and difference, if you like Hegel's terminology. Okay, so the synthesis is when all these many things are encompassed in the one. So we have back to the oneness, but it's a new kind of oneness because it includes all the otherness. All right, includes all the other things that happen along the way, and then we start new ones. So I like in my essays, if you take a look, you'll see X is the thesis. X/minus X represents the two opposites, any two opposites. And then the integration of those two, the higher encompassing of those two in oneness again is Y. And then Y becomes Y and factors into Y and minus Y. And then we go back to Z, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it ends up being not a circle, but a kind of a contemporary circle, what we call a helix. Just like in biology here, the center of existence here is another helix. A spiral. So this is with that idea of a dialectical spiral that's constantly evolving. That's also the idea of Jacob's ladder. And what else? All kinds of mystical metaphors for that. So that's basically what's unfolding here, even in one page of a story, one page and 3 sentences. the way God shows Abraham what's going on is simply teaching him dialectical philosophy, whether you like it or not. I'm sure a lot of you Frommies are pushing delete already. Okay, go ahead, do that. You know, ignorance is bliss. But that's what I see here. Okay, I'm not going to pretend I don't see it. What else can we say here? So this is the Holy Land. He's in the Holy Land, and then now I made a list here about maybe 50, 60, 70, I don't know, major terms that Shlomo uses in this book, and every one of them, in one way or other, the way I see it anyway, fits into this overall model of dialectical thinking. So the Holy Land is another way of talking about this complete dialectical system, that if we live in it, if we believe in it, if we allow ourselves to flow with it, will give us some kind of a spiritual highs. And people like Hegel like to see the whole history of the world in that context. And there's no end to all over the world. We have all different religions, all different paths, all different crazinesses using dialectical thinking. And so Judaism is no different than them in that sense, except that it interlaces it with the whole history of Jewish thinking and Jewish folklore and the Bible, whether you read it as truth, whether you read it as folklore, whatever it is. But so we're talking about dialectical thinking with Jewish labels, and that is what I would call the Kabbalah. All right, okay. That's the way I understand it. I go along with Harry Wolfson's book on Philo, and he locates the place where Greek philosophy and the Tanakh, the Bible, came together in this Philo in Alexandria, back around the time of J.C. So there's nothing so much new for the last 2,000 years in that respect. All right, so that's the first example. Now let's go to the second one. See what else had this idea of motion. Now we're going to call it local motion. All right, pops up again. Page 115. So here's a little section called "Keep on walking." Again, the idea of lech lecha, keep on going. Lech lecha, Abraham, you want to be a servant of God? Well, keep on moving. All right, there it is. And he gives Shlomo mentions an example of some rabbi that people would see him the next day, and they would say, "Oh, he looks like a different person," and somehow he made this vast transformation from yesterday to today. And that's an example of what Shlomo would call a person that knows how to keep on moving in his life. All right. By the way, if you're into the theater, Michael Chekhov, same idea of transformation as the major focus of acting, but I'm not getting into that now. Anyway, let's see. So let's see, what else does it say in this section here on page 115 that's called Keep on Walking. It says here, if you're moving in the direction... we had... Well, that was actually in 2025. 32. Let's get that one here. Yeah, I'm going to jump into 32 here. It's the next point logically in the discussion here. This is called in motion. Again, lech lecha, God is telling Abraham, lech lecha, keep going. Not just one time, you've got to keep going all the time, your whole life. Then here's the crucial point. Even if sometimes you're walking backwards, at least the main thing is you're on the way. But at least, and Shlomo makes the point, even if I keep moving, well, you know, even though I'm going backwards at the moment, I can look forward, maybe tomorrow I'll succeed in going forwards. Okay, now Shlomo is not making the distinction between the two kinds of motion here. You know, some kind of fool running around you know, selling dope or something is also keeping in motion. He's afraid to stop because he's got to get his supply of dope the next day, and if he doesn't sell a certain amount of dope, he's going to be in trouble. So this guy is a frantic, compulsive person, and he would fit into this idea of keep moving. So now here's a very important principle here. So now that you see more and more why I picked these stories, because they get right to the heart of the whole dialectical tradition here. Watch this one now. This will blow your mind. How is it possible that we keep going and we go backwards at the same time? Well, that's part of the trip, you know. Nachman Bresov says the descent for the sake of the ascent, or I'm sure you find that all over the place, all kinds of traditions. Descent for the sake of ascent. In other words, how to say this in the most simple. We're talking about the idea of tzimtzum, by the way. Tzimtzum, contraction. Now that's an extremely difficult, profound idea, but I want to make it somehow simple here, and in a sense like this. Let's see. All right, we have the thesis. Well, I start off on my trip, and along the way I get all mixed up. I have all kinds of opposites as I go from the thesis to the antithesis. So I went backwards. I thought I was going forwards, but by getting all mixed up into opposites, I went backwards. Now how am I going to get to go forwards again? Well, the magic trick is the idea of tzimtzum, and the best idea to grasp what that is to use the model of gestalt therapy. I hope you're not afraid of gestalt therapy. If you're afraid of gestalt therapy, push the delete right now, because I've been using that technique for 38 years and working with people, and I take it very seriously. So how does it relate to gestalt therapy? Well, it's really very simple. I start on my gestalt session, I'm aware of this, I'm aware of that, and next thing you know, I'm all confused, I have all kinds of opposites. So what does the director say? Close your eyes, go inside, daydream, forget about all the opposites, go into what? The void. And in the void, you will find, if you're a little patient, a new idea. The new idea which will encompass the opposites. So now we have a dialectical system which is a little more complicated. We don't just have x going to x versus minus x. We have x going to x versus minus x going to 0, the void, where you will find y waiting for you, if you have patience and a little bit of faith, that will then encompass the two horns of the dilemma, and which will take you to the next cycle, the next loop on the thing here. Okay, so what did you do? You went backwards, down, in order to go up. Because if you didn't go down, you wouldn't get to the mixed up enough so that you would be willing to close your eyes and go inside, find a new idea. In Gestalt therapy, they call this the rhythm of contact and withdrawal. Couldn't be simpler than that. You contact all the different things in your experience until you get all mixed up. You go inside, withdraw, and inside you find waiting for you the new idea, and then the new idea, you somehow allow yourself to flow with that new idea, and that will take you out of the confusion to the next level, where you will begin again the next section of your experience. Okay, so that's it. Now we've solved the second one. All right, the idea of in motion on page 132 here. So on the one hand, Abraham's got to keep going. It's not a one-shot thing. Yid has to keep going all the time, says Shlomo. And Erlich Yid, a real, true blue Jew, even if he sometimes walks backwards, at least he is walking and at least he's on the way. Okay, so that's the idea. Going backwards is a major process in this dialectical experience, this truth search that underlies, like I said, just about every major religion I know about. All right. Now, here we've come to a fork in the road, though. We have two kinds of Kabbalah, vanilla and chocolate, you might say. We have vanilla, which is the simpler kind in some sense, where there is no void to worry about so much. It's mostly about compromising. You have two things, I don't know, do this, should I do that, so I find some kind of a rational compromise. A synthesis, it's still a synthesis, so we still have going from the thesis to the antithesis to the synthesis, but it's kind of mostly a more rational thing where you bring the two together. But now we introduce the idea of a void where you get lost enough so you're willing to let yourself not know long enough to discover a new idea. And that's chocolate Kabbalah, you might say, and that's what characterizes the Kabbalah. Well, let's be very specific here. So we have the one that's based on has the void, doesn't have the void in it, the vanilla, a simple one. That's the Aristotelian tradition of dialectical thinking. Aristotle going to Maimonides, the guide, going to Chabad, going to SHLOMO. Those are the main things that are relevant right now in our discussion. And the opposite tradition is the Neoplatonic, Plato Neoplatonic tradition, going from Plato to, as far as Judaism is concerned, to Philo, and then to, let's skip everybody else in the middle, to Nachman of Breslov. So the main way I think keep it straight is to just think of Chabad or Breslov as chocolate and vanilla and chocolate, without the void, with the void. I'm not saying there's no void in Chabad, and I'm not saying that there's no rational thinking in Breslov. I'm just talking about emphases. Okay, so there are two traditions here, and my conclusion is from studying this whole book is that Reb SHLOMO CARLEBACH is 2/3 in the Breslov tradition and 1/3 in the Chabad tradition. We know historically that he was a student of Chabad for a while, but we know that he was probably very much influenced by Nachman of Breslov. He quotes him a lot. So that's appropriate. Just about every major thinker needs to some way or other bring these two traditions together. Okay. So let's see, what else can we say about that? Oh, there's another one. Let's go back to the other one we had. Keep on walking. Okay. Now, in this section, on page 115, Keep on Walking, it's called. Again, lech Abraham, you want to be a servant of God, move, keep on moving. And that's the one that has the Rebbe that seems like a different person every day because he kept moving. And here's a major point. If you're moving in the direction of God, the more you move up, the closer you move to people. Don't tell me you moved so close to God and suddenly you're away from people. So Shlomo himself has had the experience, he tells us, of I guess he meets people and he becomes a source of bringing them back to Judaism. Next he sees the same person 2 or 3 years later. The person now is a super frummy belonging to one of the sects. And that person won't even look at Shlomo because now that Shlomo isn't that super from. God forbid she looks at women, Holy cow, how unfrom can you get? So now that's the obvious storybook interpretation here. And that's as far as Shlomo goes. He gives us another clue. He says at the end of this section, he says, above all, lech lecha, keep on moving, don't stop, don't ever stand still. Get closer to yourself, to the deepest depths of you, and get closer to every human being in the world. So somehow getting close to yourself and getting close to every human being in the world, and getting close to God are all related. Now that's a little bit complicated. I mean, we can say, oh, that sounds nice. If I'm close to God, then I'm close to everybody, and everything is hunky-dory. but that's if you leave your brain behind and just get to be one of these typical Carlebach people, you know, with cotton candy between your ears, and just getting into the groove and getting into the mood and getting into all that stuff. But that's not me, unfortunately for me, and whether you like it or not, I'm sorry. So, how do I interpret this? Now, if we're going to go a little further now, we have this basic laid out system of dialectical philosophy. We need to say a little bit more about gestalt therapy to help understand this one. Because here we have a situation where somehow the closer you get to God, somehow the closer you're getting to people. Now you would think, well, if I'm getting to God, you know, I'm higher and higher and higher, and the people are down there, you know. What do? Drag them along with me somehow or other? What's the sense in that? Now, what does it have to do with getting in touch with myself? Well, let's see, if I get in touch with myself and my deepest self, but still, I'm here and the person's over there, and you know, there's a logical element here that's missing in just about every one of SHLOMO CARLEBACH's stories. And here in the commentaries, the same thing. I mean, it's there if you know how to find it. But unfortunately, I have not seen anybody that knows how to find it. So that I'm taking upon myself the responsibility. So here's a difficult one. And to get to this one, you need to think a little bit. Okay? Now, the clearest way to understand this thing is in gestalt therapy. Listen carefully now. Let's say I like to work with 3 hours with somebody in gestalt therapy session and working on a dream, because that in 3 hours that person can move, keep moving, lech, keep moving, and actually get somewhere, get closer to something or other. You know, rather than one of these quickie group things, 15 minutes to each customer, they pay a lot of money and you basically get nothing, or practically nothing. But let's say you do my work, okay, and you spend 3 hours. So you start off with something very superficial, you know, I had this dream, and I tell this happened. But after 3 hours, if you work with associations, this associates to this, you go through thesis, antithesis, synthesis, that's a little bit of the depth of the rebirth of ego, and then you do another cycle, another cycle. Let's say in the course of 3 hours you might do 5 cycles. Each one's going to somehow or other, since you're in the here and now, you're flowing along with this river of experience, what they call the phenomenology of the spirit. That's Hegel's word for it. The river. Nachman of Breslov also talks about the river. I am the brook, he says in the prologue, and that's what he's talking about. I am the dialectical brook, and you flow with me, and you'll get your dialectical philosophy without having to think about philosophy. Okay? So, let's say we have a 3-hour session. After 2 hours, say this particular customer, client, whatever, searcher, is dealing, let's say, with mother. You know, mother died. I got to deal with mother, and at the beginning, the person was dealing with all kinds of conflicts. You know, oh, I hate that you did this, and then I'm guilty about that, and I should have done this, and this could have happened. And all of these things are levels that need to be worked through. But there's this crucial point that if a person is working well for up to almost 3 hours, it very often happens, I won't say always, but it happens a lot, that a person gets to a point which I am going to label the point of unfinished business. Unfinished business. And what's so special about that point is that now we have it's always with 2 chairs in gestalt therapy. One side talks to the other. That sets up an X and a minus X for a dialogue there. And more as the time goes by, the session is more and more awareness, it gets harder and harder to see these 2 sides as opposites. More and more, since a lot of times you start identifying, because since you have to become the other person in order to do the 2 sides. You know, this is not psychodrama with auxiliary egos playing the different sides. No, this is gestalt therapy where the whole thing is your world, and that's what keeps it so spiritual, in my opinion, and so close to the Kabbalah. Each time you identify with that other side, the other person, say your mother, you come closer, and it gets harder to see her as opposite to you. And more it becomes, you begin to get a sense that there's some unity, some synthesis, which is kind of on the, almost ready to take over here. And if I just let myself go and stop hanging on to my preset idea, you know, that I'm guilty about this, and she should have done this, and I should have done that, and if I let some of that just be secondary and just stay with the contact and the awareness and just express the love or the hate or whatever it is that needs to come out to finish the business, so to release that energy so that you can say to that person, okay, now mother, you go in peace to your grave. Of course I love you. I'm willing to let you go in peace to your grave, and I'm not going to hang on to you like some kind of divik. I'm not going to keep you to myself like this for the rest of my life and strangle myself with you and strangle you with me. No, I'm not going to play that dumb game. I'm going to be more intelligent, more dialectical, and I'm going to allow you to go to your peace, and somehow, you know, we will be together again in the next world or something, you know, or when the Messiah comes, or whatever. In Gestalt therapy, they call it identify with the coming solution. Identify with the coming solution. So in other words, I'm identifying with the new oneness that wants to come. Call it God, call it, if you look at the aesthetics of the 15th century, where you find this kind of thinking in a person like Marsilio Ficino, a humanist, Neoplatonic philosopher. He said, this is beauty. What is beauty in dialectical thinking? It's the one in the many. The oneness that permeates the manyness. And that this again, the idea of the one in the many is the synthesis in dialectical thinking, the goal that it all leads towards, and allows you to begin the next cycle, more or less encompassing and somewhat freed up from the previous impasses. Okay, so that moment of the unfinished business is like pre-messianic moment, very special moment. And in that sense, we could, this little parable here, this Torah commentary, immediately becomes obvious. Get closer to yourself, to the deepest depths of you, and get closer to every human being in the world. Right? Because the more you do this process of integrating the two sides, of many different sides of your personality, with this process of dialogues and identifications and contact and awareness and all that, rhythm of contact and withdrawal, the more you're getting into yourself, the more you're allowing your ego parts to, one after the other, to be negated. These negations are the negations. Remember, each of these parts that you're stuck in, x minus x, is a negation of the oneness you started out with in your, when you know, before you were born, you might say, and your origin and your moment of in the beginning, whatever that means. And here, all these negations are negated by this process, and more you're identifying with the emerging oneness and in the otherness, or the otherness and the oneness, or God and the world and God, or whatever you want to call it. And that way, all of the different othernesses that you could possibly conceive of, which includes just about everything and everybody you know, because so much of how we deal with people is just a collection of our own projections. You're getting closer to all of them. All these othernesses are being integrated at one time. So that's what it says here. Shlomo says, get closer to yourself, to the deepest depths of you. In other words, this moment of tzimtzum, where you contract your ego, allow these opposites to just die off one after the other, and get, at the same time, you're getting closer to every other human being in the world. Now that's a logical explanation of some very fuzzy Shlomo Carlebach sentences here. All right. The other sentence in this one is here. If you're moving in the direction of God, the more you move up, the more you move up, the closer you move to people. Right. Right. This is the opposite of what the example of this guy, this person, you know, that now has contempt for you because that person has become so much more religious, or you have contempt for other people because you've become more religious. You know, when you walk around the street and just start rubbing your beard every time you see somebody who doesn't have a beard, you know, then that's the problem, not the solution. Okay. And this is another example. Abraham Avinu is entering the covenant of God. How close can you get? Right, this moment of unfinished business, just the pre-messianic moment where everything is ready to come together to a moment of enlightenment, if you're into thinking in Platonic terms, or explosion into authentic feelings and action, if you're into an Aristotelian thinking. Either way. So that's the idea of the covenant with God. And here's another code word. Just like the Holy Land is a code word for this complete dialectical process here, with total holiness. The word covenant also is another code word. And here's Shlomo using the word exactly the way he's supposed to use it according to the tradition. Abraham is entering the covenant of God. How close can you get? Right, that's the moment of unfinished business of gestalt therapy. If it were any closer, you and your mother would disappear into this explosion of grief or joy or anger or whatever needs to be dealt with in that relationship to bring the thing to catharsis. All right? So how close can you get? This is as close as you could get and still be you, where the two sides of you are still pretty clear, but on the verge of identification with, becoming one with that oneness that's about to take over, and you can, if you allow yourself to surrender to it. So that's the logic here. Okay. Another sense here. This is one of the tests of Abraham Avinu, because the angels came to him and told him he's going to have a son. The test was, here he is, Abraham. This is according to Shlomo. Abraham has just become a Jew, all right, and all of a sudden come along three goyim with wings. And he has a conflict, should I invite these people into my house or what? What about them? Now, if he's being tested, it's a perfect example of a moment of what we just said, some conflict, extreme opposites. Now, if Abraham would have avoided that moment, he would have missed out the chance to suffer, to complete the whole dialectical process, from thesis to antithesis to void, to synthesis. But the three angels, because he took the risk of dealing with them, he completed the whole cycle, and as a reward, guess what he got? A baby, a son. And so he was being tested, and this is another key term that Shlomo uses throughout his book here. The idea of testing of Abraham, or testing of anybody, is just about a perfect parallel to the idea of tzimtzum, the idea of extreme opposites, and it's a code word for the Breslov's Kabbalah, which emphasizes the void and the contact and withdrawal thing, and it tells you that it's not dealing with the other kind of Kabbalah, where it's about rational synthesis and opposites that can be more easily dealt with. And come to think of it, while we're at it, the opposite in this respect of the Chabadnik in the story here is not Noach or Eve. Either Eve or Noach are people in Shlomo's interpretation that are very much preoccupied with either or. Eve is into the tree of knowledge, good and evil. It's got to be either this or that. That's called some kind of wisdom, but it's a false wisdom because it's not the tree of life. And Noach is into judging people. He agrees with God that everybody here should be destroyed. So he's again doing what we call in gestalt therapy the top dog, underdog judging relationship, rather than doing what Abraham does. Abraham is being tested, and he's the one who's able to complete the total, you might say, Breslaver dialectic, which includes the void. Okay? And the point Shlomo wants to make, he keeps citing of Abraham Avinu, our father, as the beginning, somehow the beginning of Judaism. Why? Because Abraham was the first one that took this trip of total annihilation of ego by getting totally involved in the opposites, the conflicts, the tzimtzum process, the testing, and allowed himself to go back to the origin of reality. Or, if you want to give it a philosophical label, Plato calls it anamnesis. Not amnesis, forgetting. Not forgetting. In other words, going back to the basic ideas that you get to when you allow yourself to go through this process of opposites and going inside and finding new ideas, and little by little the trail of associations lead you to the basic primary experiences or ideas or emotions or whatever you want to call them in your life that you are made up with. And these are, in a sense, the patriarchs of your life, your beginnings. All right, so your beginnings and the beginning of the Jewish people have converged. And in that sense, Abraham is the beginning of Judaism, and for all of us, because he is a paradigm case here, a person that suffers this test and comes out on top each time, of course. Let's see, I'm looking at the clock here. I want to try to get to the last one more here. 65, page 65. Okay, and another lovely example of, we keep getting more and more information here, how the dialectic works, and we see more and more how useful this relatively simple tool of gestalt therapy is to understand this stuff. I mean, you can get blue in the face reading, you know, try to read, get the same ideas out of Likutei Moharan, you know, without having a good background in philosophy, and, you know, you get some of the most spaced out, bewildered people in the world reading that book and dancing around with some kind of a hysterical frenzy and thinking they know what they're talking about. Because the Rebbe who doesn't know what he's talking about, and who learned it from another Rebbe who doesn't know what he's talking about, and none of them take the trouble to get to the basic logical ideas. Okay, but I'm gonna try to avoid that trap. So let's boil this one down to some hard-nosed thinking here. Running to God, 65. They heard the sound of Hashem, God, moving about in the garden in the wind of the day. The man and his wife hid from God. So Adam and Eve are hiding, okay? Hiding from God. Now, simple parallel in Gestalt therapy is whether you want to avoid or you want to deal. The way we avoid is by getting stuck in the habits and hanging on to our habits. In Gestalt therapy, there are 5 levels of we call self-interruptions. Oops, self-interruptions. There's confluence, where you're flowing with. Con is with, flow to flow. You're flowing with your habits, like a psychotic baby, totally locked into your little ritual world there. Anything that isn't totally exactly the way you want it to be, you're going to explode or kill somebody or kill yourself or something. The next higher level of sanity is introduction. You've swallowed some authority figure, you know, maybe your father, maybe your mother, maybe the Rebbe, maybe Adolf Hitler, whoever it is, you have a dibuk that's running your life. Okay? And the next level is projection. You're a little more alive, but you're projecting most of your aggression and your feelings out to other people. That person's going to kill me, that person's going to rape me. Projection. Retroflexion. You're a little healthier than that. Energy wants to come out. What do? You can make compulsive rituals and, oh God, help me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to die. You make yourself a nervous wreck, and that's one sure way not to communicate with anything or anybody, except your own body, your own compulsions. And then finally egotism, where you're all set to go with the flow, and then you say to yourself, oh my God, who am I anyway? What am I doing here? How do I get involved in this stuff? I can't do that. me be religious, or say goodbye to my mother and let her die, and I gotta hold on to her. What are you talking about? I can't do that. Even though you're just about ready, you've gone through the whole process, you won't let go because your self-image of who you think you are is keeping you that way. So that's called egotism. That's the healthiest of the 5 levels of self-interruptions. All right, so each of these self-interruptions is a way of avoiding what? Avoiding life, avoiding the action, avoiding the dialectic, avoiding everything that this whole system is about. And you manage to avoid it. So we all do it to some extent. We avoid things by hanging on to safe patterns of behavior. Okay? So, here's what Shlomo says. You, my beautiful friends, whenever a person is sad, they want to run away from the world. They're avoiding. Okay? Rather than dealing. So you're not saying, see now, let's see what he says here. Whenever a person is sad, they want to run away from the world. They want to run away from themselves. They want to run away from themselves, and they want to run away from God. whatever a person has said. Now that sounds a little fishy, because really, the goal should be here to allow yourself to suffer the process. So it's like a calculated risk. If I allow myself to have a little bit of discomfort, then I have faith that somehow or other this river of experience, this truth search, maybe this crazy teacher or therapist, whatever it is, maybe he's right, and maybe it'll work. So an element of allowing yourself to suffer, to be sad. So right away I'm a little suspicious about that first sentence. They are hiding and building walls around themselves, okay? Yeah, okay. So here's what Shlomo says. So what should I do? And this is what Reb Nosson, disciple of main student of Nachman of Breslov, told him. Instead of running away, run to the one, to the only one who can help. Okay, that's the idea. So allow yourself to identify with the coming solution, to complete the process you're doing, to run. It's not the idea of running to the one. It's the idea of running to the one and the many. Remember, the one that encompasses all these things that I'm going through, and allowing myself to suffer the endless process of death and rebirth and negations of the negations, whatever you want to call it. In the case of the example I mentioned, allowing yourself to say goodbye to Mother, if that's what it's about. And that way you're running to the oneness that will include you and your mother in a higher level integration, in some kind of a sense that makes some kind of a sense emotionally or to you. All right? And run to that rather than running away from that. Okay? Sadly, as Shlomo says, sadly enough, when we get older, we get perverted, we run away from everything. Okay, now the sense I can make of that is, and in a certain sense it's true, the older we get, we're more inclined to enjoy our habits. We don't want to take risks. Some of us, anyway, don't want to take risks unless we're used to taking risks. So that's the idea of avoidances, self-interruptions. So in that sense, he's kind of saying like the older we get, the more we get to be like a psychotic 5-year-old. Except that it's not that extreme, of course. Adam was driven out of paradise because he was hiding from God. Why were you hiding? You don't trust me enough to tell me you did wrong. Okay, that's the same idea here. To trust God is to allow yourself to deal with this experience of contact and withdrawal. Now, this is a major point that he's going to get to in other lessons, and we'll get to it. I told you this is going to be not so systematic, but I'm trying to get to these things as they come along. In what sense are you talking to God when you do gestalt therapy or praying? In this sense, every time you do this process of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, you go inside to the void, you get a new idea. Where's the idea coming from? It's coming from the void. Who's the void? God, the nothingness, the everythingness, whatever you want to call it, the Ein Sof. That's where it's coming from. So that word is coming out of you when you go into that void each time, each time you go in, you get another syllable of that word. So at the end of 3 hours, if you've done it 5 times, you have 5 syllables, and maybe you begin to get in the overall existential message of the whole session. So the rhythm of contact and withdrawal, in that sense, is a conversation, because the contact part is my everyday experience. I see this, I see that, I'm in touch with my body, I'm in touch with my fantasies. That's my contact. That's me talking to God. And I'm telling that to the void, to God, when I say I'm aware of this, And then I go inside, and I just allow myself to be open to hear what God's answer is, So every time I go inside with one of those X and minus X things, I'm going inside with another question. And every time I come out with a new idea, I'm getting another answer. So in that sense, it's a dialogue with God. The rhythm of contact and withdrawal is a conversation with God. And that's the sense that we're going to see over and over again, that when we see the whole thing about questions and answers with God, that's why the Gestalt model is so beautiful. You can see it happening right there. The word that comes out of you when you do this process of contact and withdrawal is the answer to your questions. You propose the questions to God because you're the guy that comes up with all the opposites. And then you allow God to answer your questions by allowing yourself to be passive. So there's an active passivity involved here. Action is to set up the opposites. Passivity is to allow yourself to be stupid enough to discover a new idea. Learned wisdom. That's the Christian version. What was his name? Nicholas de Cusa, Catholic theologian, called it learned wisdom. So Bressov calls it, well, whatever they call it. I forgot what the small Nachman would call it. Find the idea in each thing. How's that? Every time you identify with something, you find the idea of that thing. So you play your mother 10 times, you find 10 different ideas about who your mother is and what she needs and everything. And you go back and forth a few times, and those ideas, when you get to a high level here with these opposites going back and forth, you do this 3 hours, you're moving up all the time in higher levels of the ladder. It's like you're almost getting to the level of the ideas in the mind of God. You've almost crossed over from the microcosm to the macrocosm of the world of pure ideas. If you're a Platonic person that sees things dualistically, there's the microcosm, and then you need the faith to make the leap of faith to get to that. Or if you're an Aristotelian, well, and it all happens kind of logically by a series of associations, whatever, without the leap of faith so much. Okay, but anyway, that's it. All right. So, point is, just like Adam, if we don't allow ourselves to do this talk to God thing, we hide from God with our avoidances, with our habits, with our self-interruptions, then that we're going to get kicked out of Gan Eden also. Why were you hiding? You don't trust me enough to tell me you did wrong. Yeah? You got to trust God, trust something. You don't need to trust a therapist. You can do this yourself. You don't have to be a genius to read Gestalt therapy verbatim and copy the exercises and just go off on the top of a hill somewhere and talk to God. By the way, if you look at my video called Hitbo the Dud, Talking to God, which has been seen by probably about 30,000 people already, it seems to be a hit, you'll see me doing that process, dealing with the death of my mother. Okay, I did it. I did it. And I did a similar process when I dealt with my brother, another video which is called The Living Room, dealing with the death of my brother. So I'm talking about something that I do myself. I'm not just making this up. All right. The last sentence is here. I'm looking at the end of probably getting the end of the tape here. The Gemara says, "Ein adam omed al divrei Torah ela im ken nichshal bahen." In other words, no man grasps divrei Torah, the words of the Torah or the way of the Torah, Eliam Ken, unless he nichshal, unless he fails. He goes through the process of all the time trying and failing, all the time ascent and then descent. Each time I go a little ahead to y, then I go back to x. I'm stuck in x, y, and minus y. I jump ahead to z, then I go back and I'm stuck in the z and minus z. And it's always falling in order to to rise. Jacob's ladder. All right, called learning from mistakes. Shlomo says the deepest knowledge comes from mistakes. You don't learn until you make mistakes. Everything is okay, but why are you hiding? Okay, so that's it. Don't hide from the mistakes. All right, so we see how just talking about this big, what is lech, what kind of motion? We unfolded here the entire, pretty much, maybe most of the elements of dialectical thinking, Gestalt therapy. And at the same time, I've showed you maybe 10, 20 different ways that Shlomo himself is using this. Now, how much Shlomo himself knew he was doing this, I don't know. I have no references. I never talked to him enough. In fact, when I did talk to him, I could not get him to talk about these things in his philosophical way. Maybe he didn't want to. Maybe he didn't know. I don't know. So he might have got this stuff from his teachers, from the rabbis, other people. He might have, probably he knows very well what he's doing, because the main thing about this book that I'm impressed with, it is so consistent. Here we have about 50 different sections here from the Torah, and every one is using the same systematic thinking, the same words mean the same thing, the metaphors are exactly used very consistently, occasionally a little different, but really this system is too precise, too well done to be done by a person that doesn't really know philosophy. It's exactly what what Nachman Abresov said. He's telling all his disciples, no, God forbid you should study philosophy. God forbid you should study the guide of Maimonides. Meanwhile, if he didn't study those books, he couldn't have written what he did and said what he said. So he's obviously talking on two different levels. Simple things for the simple people and more complicated things for the more complicated people. You know, the Peshat, the Sod. I'm giving you the Sod. Shlomo is usually giving you the Peshat. And whether he would want to bother with the Sod, I don't know how he would deal with that. Okay. Well, I think I've made my point about the idea of motion as the first video here. Getting to the end of the video, I'm asking myself, did I cover everything? No, I didn't cover everything, but I think I covered something. The idea of motion. What is it? Dialectical motion. And that's the kind of motion, lech lecha. Keep moving with the sense and the essence, but the main thing is to be here and now, using that kind of here and now awareness process rather than getting stuck in the other kind of thinking. So it's inductive logic versus deductive logic. Using inductive logic rather than getting stuck in deductive logic. Abraham Avinu is an inductive man. Noah and Eve are deductive people. We'll get into those more of that technical jargon later on. You don't have to know that for this quiz, okay? For the next quiz, but it's all there, right? We've introduced so much of this stuff already, just by dealing with one simple idea of what is motion, lech lecha. What's he talking about? How is it possible to keep going all the time and stay in one place, and all the time be going up and going down at the same time? It's total paradoxical stuff, but yet it's totally logically clear if you take the trouble to think it through. If you don't take the trouble to think it through, then, well, you're like most other people. You know, cotton candy between your ears and follow the Rebbe. Follow the Rebbe song. Okay, if that's all you need is Shlomo's dances and songs and all that, you got it. If you want more than that, maybe you'll stick around and hear some more. Okay, thank you.